it's Jack, and this video is for you if you care too much about what people think. If that's you, I want you to hang around because I think I've got some pointers that will really help you. So the first thing you can do if you care too much about what people think is really do some work on your own inner critic. Most of the time, from what I've observed, people who are really sensitive to other people's criticism tend to have quite a strong inner critic. And what I mean by inner critic is that voice in your head that says mean things to you, that paints mean possibilities, or that's kind of tough or hard on you. Might be that it's a taskmaster, might be that it tells you you need to do more or be more or show up more. And you can generally identify your inner critic because it has this edge of being a taskmaster, of kind of being pushy and tough, and the voice tends to be hostile or mean or critical in some way. Now, if that's you, the good news is the more you can work on reducing the volume of that voice in your head, the less the criticism from the outside will seem as hard to you. Where criticism from the outside often might be most devastating for you is where it's picking up somewhere that you already have an internal criticism, right? So if you can learn how to tame that voice in your head, distance yourself when you need be, or sometimes you can just put your arm around it and say, hey, thanks for making me aware of the thing that your inner critic's pointing out, and I got this. I'm in my adult, and I'm okay, actually. And what's difficult about relaxing the inner critic for most people is that the inner critic may pick up on information that is partially true, right? So it may pick up on something that it kind of is noticing about you, that maybe you might want to work a little harder on something, or maybe you are procrastinating. The difference is the inner critic is the way that it orients to you, right? It's sort of not the thing that it says, it's the way that it says to you. Because there could be a way for you from your higher self to say the same thing of, hey, you care about this project, it's worth you getting up earlier and getting to work on it, rather than, hey, you lazy so-and-so, why don't you get up earlier and put your button to work and put some elbow grease into this, So same message, different voice, different orientation to you. Now, the second thing that you can do if you care too much about what other people think is to start to put less attention on other people. And what I mean by this is actually a specific practice. I call it the 80-20 practice. And it's putting 80% of the attention over here with yourself and only 20% of the attention on the other person. Probably, for those of you that care too much about what other people think, there might be the tendency for a lot of your attention to be over there with other people, that you're actually very attuned to other people, that you're very oriented to other people, that you're very much in their experience. I notice this when I coach, when I ask people about their experience and they start talking about someone else's experience. And they use the word you when they're referring to I. So they'll say, oh, when you're walking down the street and you see someone and blah, blah, blah. And what you can practice here is actually shifting the frame of reference of your speech, taking that you and replacing it with an I. What do I think? What do I feel? What do I notice? And this will support this practice of putting an unusual amount of attention on yourself. And by the way, if you do practice this and you haven't before, it will probably feel pretty weird. I remember when I first started practicing this, probably almost 8 years ago now, I felt kind of weird. I felt selfish. I felt like I was going to miss what the other person said. I felt distant. I felt sort of back in my chair, whereas I was used to being kind of leaned in. So don't notice this energetically. If you're always like this with other people, it will feel strange for you to be like this. But being like this, being in your own center, may be hugely beneficial to you and to the people around you. Because I've got news for you. If you're this kind of person, there are probably some parts of that people like, right? That you listen, that you care, that you tune in. But there are probably some other parts that create difficulties in your relationship, right? If you're too over there with the other person, you probably merge with them at times. You probably get resentful when your own agendas aren't acknowledged because you don't even know what your own agenda is. You might have the tendency to be invasive or intrusive, or to not know how to set appropriate boundaries, or to not say how to say no. If you're leaned in like this, it's much harder to say no than if you're actually in your own space and your own center, right? So all of these things tend to relate. You care too much about what people think. It's probably because you're too much over there with people. If you start to come back over here, at least you can start to care more a little bit about what you really think. Not what your inner critic thinks, but the real you, your authentic you, your higher self, your guidance, whatever language you want to use for that. what's the real you think about you, and how can you get more in touch with that? Because it might be a little bit more loving and accepting than your inner critic. Okay, the third thing that you can do is you can start to notice the judgments that you have on other people. You may say, wait a second, Jack, I thought this was about how I can be less sensitive, careless about what other people think. And I'm saying, yeah, part of it might be that the more you can notice and relax the judgments or micro judgments that you have on other people, the easier time you'll have being yourself and letting other people be themselves. So I want to invite you to get super curious. If you know yourself as a kind, compassionate, loving person, you may not be in touch with the ways that you have micro judgments on other people. They may be subtle. So let me give you some of the more subtle flavors that I hear. You might have micro judgments on people that do boring work, right? Because you're a bit more of an idealist, or you're mission or purpose driven. And so you think that people that do menial work aren't actually in touch with the truth of reality, that life is about living your passion and purpose. You may have judgments on people that settle down young, and for you that maybe they settle down too early. You may have micro judgments on people that don't partner easily, or that do partner easily. You may have micro judgments on the decisions that people make and the ways that they spend their money, right? You may have judgments on people who pursue more entertainment than you do, or you may have judgments on people that don't know how to save. You may have judgments on people that are too hearty, that you may be a bit more practical and realistic, and other people are kind of emotional and hearty and liberal, right? You may be a liberal, and you may have micro or macro judgments on conservatives. You may have judgments on people that they should care more. You may be someone that changes the world, and you wish that all people change the world. Whatever this is, it's normally a deeper pointing to your own development if you can let it be. That the places where you have judgments on people, it's the same sort of orientation that has you fear other people's judgments on you. Here's the thing, we're human, right? Judgments are actually, evolutionarily speaking, probably useful in certain ways because they curb certain behaviors and they reinforce other behaviors. So realistically speaking, that's probably going to be part of our makeup for a while, at least some of it. So you might want to learn to be with the reality that there are judgments out there, and that's just as much about other people coping with life as it is anything to do with what's true or what's real about you. If you can start to relax the judgments you have on other people, you can start to relax the judgments you have on yourself, aka the inner critic. And then when people are judgmental to you, it might hurt a little less, or you might care a little less, or you might just be in the perspective that Johnny has judgments, I also have judgments, so I don't need to judge the fact that he has judgments because I have them, because I'm real and true and sober and in touch with myself. And I don't necessarily have to respond to his judgments. If someone wants to give me some feedback, I can be open to it, but if it comes in the form of a judgment, maybe I don't have to listen too much to it, or maybe I can start to distinguish that even if something comes with a judgment, and this is a more subtle realm of development, there may be something partially true about it, and I want to be open to the nugget in that. So even if you hurt me a little bit when you come with your judgments, when I'm taking my time to listen or journal or just kind of metabolize what's going on in my life, I might notice, oh, maybe you have a point. Maybe I don't like the messenger. Maybe I don't like the way that you're judging me. But actually, you're pointing back something that may actually be in my development. So this is the other benefit of developing a slightly thicker skin, is that you can start to develop from what people bring to you rather than just feel bad about yourself or wish it were different. It's like, a parent with a child. There might be some things where you say, hey, don't do that, or here's a better way of doing that, or I like your homework, but here's a better way of doing it, or here's a suggestion. Even if the parent isn't doing it in the most conducive way that the child can hear, you don't want to take that same script that you found difficult in your upbringing and now repeat it all the way through your adulthood. You want to be open to people's feedback and criticism, even if sometimes it stings, because it might carry the message that's actually the key to your development. This is one of the big ironies of development, that the things that people most need to hear are sometimes the hardest for them to hear because they've got so much sensitivity and criticism and defense that goes around that thing. Okay, the fourth thing that you might want to pay attention to if you want to care less about what people think is notice how much are you invested in a self-image or an identity. How much you invested in a self-image or an identity. So the point being here that the less invested you are in a particular image of yourself or a particular way of people seeing you, the more freedom and flexibility you have when people see you in a way that is different than the way you want them to see you. Right? You might start to get the flavor of this, that if I don't really care about the image that you have of me, not that I'm insensitive, not that I'm impenetrable to feedback, but if I just realize you have a sort of right to your view of me, that maybe that's not really my business, then there's a kind of freedom there. And I don't need to get worked up, or I don't need to get too sensitive if you're seeing me in a way that I don't want to see myself. And actually I start to realize that the way I see myself can be a barrier on the spiritual path. That part of my inner work might be becoming less invested in my own identity. That if I'm not identified with a particular image or perception or persona, that it starts to free up the script so I can do and be more things than that narrow sense of identity. If I'm invested that you see me as loving, then there's a whole set of things that I won't want to reveal to you, or I won't want to acknowledge about myself when I'm actually not being loving, right? That there's a lack of authenticity, that actually I'm going to try and behave lovingly towards you, but inside I'm like, "Urgh." You know, maybe I'm angry, or maybe I don't care right now, or maybe I'm under-resourced. And so actually trying to be loving when I'm under-resourced, the loving thing would actually be to go and rest. Do you see what this is pointing to? So it's starting to challenge the notion that your sense of identity is the truth of your identity. That the more you can have some allowingness, some flexibility around your identity, the less you're trying to protect it from other people. Like, so if they think of you in a different way, maybe that's fine. You know, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay that when I go back to the UK, my home country, some people think I talk in a pretty strange way because I've lived in America for so long. Okay. What am I going to do about that? I can put on a different accent, or I can justify that actually I don't sound as different as they think I sound, but in some ways that's just how I sound, you know? Deal. So there's a little bit here of tough love, right? Of not getting too attached to a particular view of yourself or that other people have to you. And by the way, when you do this, what's the benefit to you? You save a ton of time and attention. All those conversations yourself about, well, he said this and she said that and he thought this and how could they think that and how could they say this and who am I? And all of that noise can start to reduce so that you can actually just be more directly and simply with what is actually happening in your life. So I hope this has been useful. If you are someone that's been caring a lot about what people think, I'd love you to practice what is in this video. Please, if you've watched this far, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm releasing new videos every week on personal growth, love, and relationships. You can just click the bell icon, or you can see it come up in the square at the end of this video. Just click subscribe. And questions and comments welcome. Please put them below this video. I'm Jack Butler. Thanks for being with me.